So our keynote speaker for the day, well, other than Steve, our CEO, is Chris Rockwell, who's Director of Operations for GPT Division. So Chris has responsibility for GPT worldwide, five operations. One of the operations is the one that you're going to see here tomorrow that you're going to go to. I thought I might mention a couple of things that he may not mention about himself. I think he'll probably mention this one. Chris was one of our safety coaches from the people speaking here not too long ago. I don't remember exactly how many years ago it was, but he was one of these folks talking about it. And he had responsibility for one operation and several operations, and operations. And he's been very successful at it. This division has one of the best on-time records within the company, has short lead times, and is very profitable. And so Chris went from a safety role to an operations role, and he had zero experience in operations. And we see that a lot within the field. Chris is not the only one. He's probably one of the most successful if you're going by, let's say, scope of operations as your metric. But so I think it might give the folks here a unique perspective on safety and operations. And so I'm super excited about Chris talking here today. So Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. It's quite an introduction. So good afternoon. Like Joe said, my name is Chris Rockwell, and I'm responsible for operations for GPT. And really it's a privilege to have the opportunity to have you visit our site here in Denver tomorrow, and I can't wait. I think you'll get to see a lot of the tools that we just talked about in action in real life, what that looks like, what it feels like, and stuff like that. So what I wanted to do is take a little while, and I'm going to share my voice, my story, a little bit about me, and then towards the end of that, in the spirit of trying to offer an experience that is customized for you, I've been taking some notes about kind of some of the things that have come up, and I'm going to try to speak to some of those things, and then we can have a kind of a conversation. I hope. So, do y'all mind if I sit down? Thanks. So, I'm going to start by just sharing some history about me and my background, and kind of Joe shared a little bit of it, but I'm going to share a little more. So I graduated from Syracuse University, College of Environmental Science and Forestry in 1996, and really was pursuing a career in environmental, and so I got a wonderful opportunity right out of school to take on a corporate environmental engineer role for a company called Canada Gold Mine Company. The guys from Western will know this. It's now called Constellation Brands. It's the largest beverage alcohol company in the world. And so it was a great opportunity, although by all of my peers I was viewed as a sellout because I didn't go sit in a tower and look for smoke and a forest fire or something like that. I went into the industrial world. But I had a great experience there, and probably couldn't ask for a better opportunity, but especially out of school. And after a couple of years, though, what happened is I started to realize that my boss was the highest environmental health and safety professional in this whole company, and she was about 35 years old, and I kind of put two and two together and figured out that, you know what, there's not a lot of room for movement for me here. And so I love that company. I still love that company. It's a wonderful company. Nothing but great things to say about it, but at that time it was time for me to see maybe another opportunity. And so as I started looking, I can remember one Sunday morning I was out to breakfast with my mother, and she brought me this torn out from a newspaper ad from an agency, and it was for an environmental engineer, and I was like, okay, I'll follow up on that. Well, I did, mainly because I told her I would, not because I thought it was going to actually lead to anything. But that company turned out to be Garlock. And in 1998, I was hired at Garlock as their environmental engineer for their site in New York. And so that kind of started my experience with Enpro Industries at the time. I think you remember from this morning, it was Coltech and then Goodrich, so I've been through that whole evolution with the company. And so over time, between 1998 and 2005, I gradually assumed some more responsibilities. And in 2005, I assumed the responsibility for safety for that site. It's our largest site. At the time, it was about 600 employees. But I gotta be honest with you, I didn't want it. I didn't like it. To tell you the truth, I pretty much failed at it the first time. And so consequently, that responsibility was taken away from me for a period of time, and then kind of through another evolution, I ended up back in safety. And I was excited about it the second time. It was a different mindset. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage, and really this is where my voice begins. So I became an active member of the safety team within Enpro, and my colleagues in the back. That's like my family back here. And so we worked through things. So this chart, you saw it in a much prettier format earlier. Actually, you've seen it several times. And so we started our journey through many of these things as they rolled out of escorting and many of the things that we've discussed already today. And I was an active participant in those things. And you know what? Things are going pretty good. They're going pretty good. And so over time, our rates were getting better. We were improving. I think Joe shared around the time that we became Enpro, we were about industry average. You can see here at this site, we were about industry average. But things were going all right. Things were improving, we put things in place. And so I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was great. But at that time, my motivation was really results-oriented. And I don't want to give you the impression that I'm not a results-oriented guy, but at the time, my motivation was solely results-oriented. And you know what? We were getting those results. And I was really excited about that. Really proud of it. So by 2010, I had gradually assumed more and more responsibility. And so in 2010, I was the Global Director of Environmental Health and Safety. So I was responsible for 27 sites around the world from an EHS perspective. And so I thought that was just, man, things were going great. And the record was improving, our results were getting better, and the thing is I didn't get it yet. I didn't get it yet. If I'm being honest, and don't take this the wrong way, but if I'm being honest, it was about me. I was proud to show that chart because it made me proud of what it said. So it's kind of embarrassing to share it from a group of 50 people, but that's that's the truth. I don't want to give you the impression I didn't care about people that's not true. But at the end of the day, really, I like showing that graph because it was really good for my ego. So in 2010, there was a lot of activity going on in our company, and I was really fortunate that I was able to be part of a small team of people who were working on due diligence for an acquisition, an upcoming acquisition. In fact, it was going to be the largest, it may still be, is it still the largest acquisition we've ever done, Joe?
I think so. There was another one that's about that size.
It was a big one.
Yeah.
For us. And so I was part of that. I was part of that team that was working on due diligence, and it was, you know, for us it was a really big deal. And for me, it was a really big deal. And on February 14th, 2011, we closed on that deal. And we bought a company called Pipeline Steel and Insulator. And they had several sites around the world. Three of them, well, they had four sites around the world. Three of them were kind of small. One was fairly large, 500 people, and that one was in Houston. And I had actually been to all the sites actually prior to the acquisition, and so we knew, based on our visits to the site in Houston, that I'll just say things weren't up to snuff from a safety standpoint, at least to our standards. And so there was 3 people there on day one, on February 14, 2011. And I was one of those guys because we knew we needed to take immediate action. And so I was right there with my saying we were going to get results, and I was going to show an awesome chart, and I was going to be able to show Steve and Joe and all these wonderful things that were going to change. And that's really, this is really where my life changed. There were some things going on for me as far as my personal development at that time, and my experience with this group of people changed my life. So I mentioned it wasn't up to snuff, and I don't know that I could describe for you what the place was like, what the conditions were like, what the equipment was like, and how people were treated when we purchased that company. But I'm going to share with you some photographs. And, you know, it's not even going to come close, actually, to understand what it was like, but it'll paint somewhat of a picture, I hope. So, you know, the first thing we did, we had a kind of an amnesty day. We had people turn in, I'll call them loosely, tools. So you can see the cardboard box full of razor blades that they were used to cut things without even a utility knife, just a razor blade. This was actually a lathe, and they were using it just like that. Just like you see it there. Also kind of paints a picture from the kind of 5S that you see in this photograph is pretty much what the whole place looked like. So this may take a little bit of explanation, but this is a couple of pipes with some fittings on it, and they had holes. It was actually for an injection molded that they weren't using anymore. And so rather than just going down and buying a couple of threaded pipe plugs, this was very typical. I just want to say this has happened. These are broomsticks that are being held in by rags tied together, and that's how they were plugging these pipes. These are the types of tools when I arrived that I found people were using. So I'm going to I'm going to pass this. This is, I'll share a story with you. When I walked around and I started finding these things, I'm like, hey, what's up with these things? And they're like, oh man, we call those things prison shanks. And I was like, hey, where I come from, we call them prison shanks too. So I have one of those prison shanks. I'm going to pass it around. Y'all can check it out. But so here's the deal. Nobody was buying them tools. And so in order to do their job, so they didn't lose their job, they would make their own tools out of pipe clamp and a razor blade, or like you see here, electrical tape and a piece of wire. So this is, I just want to note, this is, first of all, the blade's fairly dull, but it's got some tape over it. And shortly after acquiring that business, there were a number of individuals that came along with the business, some leaders, some supervisors, etc. And I couldn't, you know, we went out and we spent a few $1,000 on tools and stuff, and I went away on a Friday, I came back on Monday, all the tools are still locked up in a cage, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And so, I remember being there on second shift, and I walked over to our molding area, which is where they were using these tools. And I walked in the break room, and there was two young kids in there. One of them's name was Bhutan. And when I walked in, I could tell, it's just one of those deals where, you know, you walk in the room and they were like, you know, oh shit. And so I'm like, what's going, you know, what's up, fellas? You know, what's going on? And they, you know, they didn't want to tell me anything. And then, so one of them got up and left, but Bhutan stayed. And I'm like, Bhutan, what's the deal? What's going on? And he looked at me and he said, I can't pay anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about, paying? He's like, no, I can't pay anymore. I got kids, I can't afford to pay anymore. I'm like, I don't understand. What do you mean? What does that mean? And, you know, maybe I was naive to think that things like this went on. But the reason the tools weren't handed out is because their supervisor was selling them to them. And if they didn't buy them, they didn't get them. I also found out that if they wanted to work overtime on the weekend, they had to pay for that. They had to buy the right to work overtime. I also found out that on a fairly regular basis, this gentleman would haul them over to HR and make up a story, and if they didn't pay, then he filed that disciplinary back. So just to paint a picture of the type of place. So obviously that guy, he didn't last very long. In fact, he didn't last another day. Steve likes to call him the shakedown man. So this is the picture of one of my molder. So in this business, they molded rubber parts. They still mold rubber parts, actually. But this is one of my molder's arms. And so this was pretty normal because they didn't buy the PPE. So they just stuck their hand in a hot press, and the expectation was we get it burned. And I could have taken a picture of any of their arms, and they all look like that. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. And so, but this is what happened for me, and this is when I figured it out. See, I fell in love with this group of people. Because they were, and they are. I mean, they're just a wonderful group of people. Just the kindest, most hardworking, genuine, caring people I have ever met working in this type of environment. And so I fell in love with them. And so my assignment at the time, you share another part. So this is my transition to operations. So the general manager that came on in that business, he didn't last all that long either. He made some choices not to follow kind of our way, and then one that was safety stand downs. And so an opportunity arose for me to lead this team through our acquisition integration and bring them into our family. And so I took that opportunity. And so at the time I was living in New York, upstate New York, in Palmyra. And so I spent a year, 13 months actually, traveling back and forth to Houston every week and leading this group of people. And it was wonderful. I mean, and it was because I fell in love with this group. I mean, I still love them. They're just fantastic. And you know what? There was a lot of folks that had some preconceived notions about the type of people that might be working here. And they were wrong. So this is when I figured it out. I figured out that safety those numbers, they're nice. They don't mean a damn thing. They don't mean anything. What mattered to me at that time with those people, that team, my family, it was like my family. I spent a year with them. And they treated me like I was part of their family. So they taught me something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life, and I'm so grateful for it. So this is what they taught me. This is what safety is about. They taught me that safety is about family. Safety is about love. And safety is about caring enough to make a difference in someone else's life. So I know we've talked a lot about some of these things today, but I want to share some personal stuff. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? So, this is what safety is about. This is what it's about. Because every single person that you work with, you personally, have someone in your life that you feel this way about, and that feels this way about you. Every person that you work with also has someone in their life who they love and who loves them. Every person I'm here with you today, and I know that each of you, I feel like it's a privilege to be able to share something about me that I hope strikes a chord with you. Because every one of you has that. And the bottom line is, there is no margin for error. So you tell me which person that you work with that you're ready to sign up and let them get hurt. And how are we going to explain the idea that to their family, those people that they're waiting for that person to come home every night, except they're not coming home the same way today. Which person's it going to be? I want you to think about it. Every time you walk by something in the plant, Every time you make a choice not to take action, I want you to think about that. Just go back to your office and write down which person you're willing to offer up for that. So I do want to tell you, this team, this is PSI Houston. And I had the absolute privilege a few weeks ago to celebrate 2 years. Actually, it's almost 900 days now safe with them. And I just could not be more proud of everything they've accomplished and what they've done. I mean, it is a different place. And it's because it's a family. We care about each other, and we love each other. And that's how we work safe. So, this is what's important to me. This is my family. These are the people that wait for me to come home every day. And so, this is my wife, Sarah, and my 2 daughters, Maddie and Samantha. And the great part about this is because I'm the presenter, I get to do what I want to do from time to time. So I have you here. Can you say hi? Say hi. This is real. This is real. And I can assure you that every person you work with has this reality somehow, somewhere in their life. So this is what's real. And this is what matters right here. Nothing matters more than this. So no, there is no margin for error. There's no acceptable risk. I heard that conversation earlier. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There is no acceptable risk. Not for me. Not for me. Right. So I want to thank these guys because they've been sitting out there for about an hour waiting. So that's reality right there. That's what safety's about. It's not about a damn number. Those numbers don't mean, they don't mean that. So that's my voice. And I'm so grateful for an experience in Houston that it changed. It changed my life. It changed, I get it. I'm embarrassed to tell you it took me 12 years as an EHS person. I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And so the reason that I wanted to share that story is because I hope that I can bypass, I can help maybe people see it a little bit differently. Maybe bypass some of the stuff that I had to go through to get to the point where I figured it out. You can just jump there. You can just jump there. It's a choice. I didn't have someone that shared that with me. I figured that out. So that's my voice. Are there thoughts or questions about that, and I'm going to transition a little bit into a different segment.
I'm kind of curious to know, and I'm kind of curious to know that's probably the most radical a change for a workplace. Carry the academic freedom, kind of worst to best. What other great things did you see out of that business besides just the injuries? What else changed in that plant?
The whole thing is based on a mutual respect and caring and love for each other. So a lot of things come along with that, right? I mean, this is a place that wouldn't be uncommon to have a fist fight in the shop. I mean, so there's just the general way we conduct ourselves, the way we treat each other. I mean, that's a completely different place. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope it's representative of what you're asking. I can remember I started to share the idea of 5S. And I did a 20, 30-minute little spiel on 5S and what it was like, and I shared some pictures on some experiences I had had. And I didn't really say it, I didn't set any goals, we didn't do an event, and I left on a Friday, and I came back on Monday in Homero. Homero was my steel casing spacer cell lead, and when I came back on Monday, Homero he's waiting for me on Monday night. If you got there around lunchtime and walked in with my Subway sub, there he is, he's standing, he knows I'm going to be coming, and he's waiting for me. And it was really odd. That Homero was never there waiting for me. And he's standing there with a huge smile on his face, and he's like, come on, come out. And so I walk out in the shop, and they had painted their machines. They had, now look, this place was an ugly place. But there was pride. They took ownership and pride in this place. They painted their machines. They had lines on the floor to demarcate where the garbage can should go, where their work in process carts should go. And they did that on their own. I didn't tell them to do it. So just as an example, just changing the way we treat people spawned that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what came to my mind when you said that question. Any other thoughts about the MyVoice? And then I would like to take a few minutes and discuss a few of the points I heard earlier. Anybody want to have a discussion about acceptable risk? So here's some things I thought. I've been writing some notes on things that I thought would come up throughout the day. So if you'd like, I can try to answer some of those things. I know it's 4:35 and I'm standing between you and a beer, so it's really up to you. This is your experience. So this is a little tool I like to use. It's called the Roman Gladiator vote. So we're going to stick our thumb out like this, and if y'all want to keep going for a few minutes, we're going to go like this. If you don't, we're going to go like that. My feelings will be hurt, and we'll all have a beer.
Quick comment.
Please. Yeah, sure, acceptable risk.
So with acceptable risk, or
Thank you.
With the, I guess, the concept of acceptable risk.
Yes, sir.
That at some point, you're saying, I think most people believe that there's an acceptable level of performing work. You're making a product, you're making something. So it's not, short of it being robotic and everybody stands back and it just happens, right? So there has to be a level of risk in there that's acceptable. I think when it was raised earlier, it was really trying to find that balance. Where do you say that's enough, or, you know, you clearly showed passion about it when it came up about, let me talk about acceptable risk, right? That we don't want to lay that out there. We don't want this, you know, it's never enough. But even as a business leader, there's, you know, are you getting the full game from, you know, you're not putting borders on paper, right, to prevent paper cuts and those type of things. So just kind of would like to hear you expand on that if there's, you know, just kind of where your thought is as a business leader and trying to determine, you know, somebody raises an issue. Is it really an issue? Is it not an issue that we need to address, that we need to spend that money, that we need to do something?
I have a whole bunch of things going through my head all at once, so I'm trying to. So here, my first thought is, it would probably be false to say that there isn't risk in our plant. I am uncomfortable tying the term acceptable to it, because here's what that said. This is what that means to me. When I hear risk, that means that somewhere in the future, an accident is going to happen. It may be 10 years from now, it may be 100 years from now, but with a certain level of risk also comes the knowledge, you know, something is going to happen. It's statistically impossible for it not to, right? So I, as a leader, am unwilling to accept that fate. As futile as that effort may be, as a leader, I'm not going to accept that as a leader. I'm not. We are working towards perfection. And I'm definitely, this is just me again now speaking, I'm not going to tie the word acceptable to it. That's how I feel about that.
When I think in terms of acceptable risk, I think about the risks that we take every day in our own lives. We all drive cars. We all know cars crash and people die. We still drive. Most of us flew here on an airplane, they go down. So, you know, acceptable isn't a real great term for it, but there is a point at which we do accept the risk. And in industry, you want that to be, you know, at the most extreme point. But what is that point? You know, when we do a process hazard analysis in our PSM processes, we look at you know, the frequency and severity of an incident. And if we come up with an incident that could cause an explosion and a death, and it could happen once in 100 years, is that acceptable? Or do you put in systems now to make it 1,000 years, 10,000 years? You know, but we struggle with that point at which, you know, you quit developing the engineering of the systems and rely more on the employees to do the right things. Because if they do the right things, the risk pretty much goes away. But
that's a big part of it. I mean, all I can share with you. Our goal is 0 injuries, 0. That is the pursuit of perfection. I'll share another point that I wanted to hit. 12 years, or 13, whatever. So it could be really tempting for me to walk into plants, like when I walked into Denver in March of 2012, and take the controls, especially on the safety front, right? Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that, look, I may have been a pretty decent EHS guy, but the problem with that is I've now become I'm the limiting factor. I'm the limiting factor. So my beliefs, my creativity, my experiences, everything that makes me me is the constraint. And I'm here to share with you that I believe that holds a group of people back. So for me, I'm going to tie this back to for me to decide, ultimately, right, I'm responsible. So ultimately I'm going to decide what's an acceptable risk or not. I don't know. I mean, it's not. And here's what happens. People figure things out. People do things. People deliver things that I could never imagine in my wildest dreams. If I sat down and tried to script the way I wanted things to go, my experience has been when I allow people the opportunity to work on those things, they do something far beyond what I could ever even envision. And so I guess I'm coming back to why would I accept, why would I put that out there as it's like putting a wall up. Nobody, if I as the leader say that that's great, that's an acceptable risk, well, what if somebody could have solved it? No matter how improbable it might be, that would never happen if I went out there and said that's an acceptable risk. Nobody would ever work on it. Nobody would ever put their heart on it. Even if they did, they would never have the courage to come and tell me because I've already said it's an acceptable risk. So I guess that's why I said I had a lot of things going on in my head. That's what's in my head when I hear the term acceptable risk. There is and I know that we get on airplanes and we drive cars, and I understand that there is risk involved with those things. And just telling you I don't believe there's acceptable risk.
One of the things I use to define unacceptable risk to me is I always listen to that little voice in my head that talks to me a lot. And if you listen to that little voice, 99.99999% of the time it's right. So if something your voice is telling you that shouldn't be happening this way, listen to that voice. And the other thing is that, and I always use this as a measure of whether I did something right. Can I go to sleep at night when something happened or something could have happened? And so you can go put your head down, listen to that little voice, and you've got obviously the technical capability to do the job that you've been asked to do. You should be okay.
Yeah, so that, I appreciate you bringing that up because your gut's a great way. Your gut is usually a good barometer. So if you walk up on something, you see something, you're aware of something, and it makes you not, that like you just looked in the rearview mirror and the red lights are flashing by. It's probably a good barometer for you. All right, acceptable risk. Any other thoughts? I want to. So one of the things, please.
The only thing I wanted to add, we both looked at each other and said the exact same thing in duo, so I'll just go ahead and say it, but the driving and the flying and all that, those are acceptable risks we accept for ourselves. In business, when you do that for somebody else, I feel that crosses the line. So.
That's it. Thank you. That's a good point. I wanted to talk about expectations. So there's been a number of questions about how do we sustain things, how do we is how do we set the tone as leaders? And so one of those foundational things from my perspective is setting clear expectations. And I feel, well, y'all heard Steve this morning. I think that's pretty clear. I feel like it's pretty clear what the expectation is, but I also feel like, I think it was mentioned earlier about this gap where maybe senior management may have a certain level of commitment, but it doesn't find its way to wherever the intended audience might be. So that's where I feel like I come in, my team comes in. So for me, as a business leader, I know, I can tell you for me personally, I know if I have any hope of being successful as a business leader in this company, I damn well better have an excellent safety record. That's minimum. Never mind business results. I mean, if you don't have that, you got no shot. I'll also share it in my team, and you can hear two of them are here. You'll get to talk with a whole bunch of them tomorrow. There is no question with my team what the level of acceptability is, what the expectation is. It's clear. There is nothing. It's not a priority. It's a value. And there's a difference between those two things. A value is it's always there, no matter what the circumstances are. A priority, it might change. The circumstances are different, it might change. A value doesn't change. And so that's a clear exit. So I'll give you an example of that. When I came to Denver, we were $2 million and 30,000 pieces passed in. It's a $40 million business, so it's kind of a big deficit. It was fairly evident to me after a couple of weeks that something was going to happen soon. You just feel it. So I shut the business down for 4 hours, for half a day. While my salesmen are screaming at us, our customers are screaming at us. These people are like, you can't do that. Well, you know what, I can, and I'm going to, and we did. We spent 4 hours, we stopped, scrambled around like chickens with our heads cut off. We talked about it. We went out, we looked for hazards, and we fixed it. Went to Home Depot, got some things, we fixed it. You know, do I think that we fixed the whole plant? No, I don't. Do I think it's like hitting the reset button? Just as an example of setting the tone, that's setting the expectation, modeling the way on what I expect my leadership teams to do at my facilities. I would expect nothing less from them. Any thoughts on expectations or, please?
It's a question in the form of thought.
Sure.
So I'm wondering how many people would take their loved ones or themselves and go to a hospital setting expecting that that hospital would have acceptable risks. Unfortunately for our hospitals that do business that way, because putting a secure program in place, a safety program in place costs money. And as there's no money to pay for certain costs associated with healthcare, those risks become labeled as RTF or run to fail. Let that item fail. Let that item failing, you have to associate the risk with allowing it to fail, right? So I don't think anybody in their right mind would really want to go to the hospital
There was some questions about what do we do to develop people. And I think Steve shared a number of examples of working on self. So here's an example. So I have 2 of my team here. These are future leaders in our business. Okay, and they sit in my chair somewhere down the road. Part of my responsibility as a business leader is to take care of our business, and taking care of our business is taking care of our future. So we have, we call it scaffolding. So look, it's my responsibility to make sure that who I'm going to hand off, I'm going to hand this business off to somebody someday. Or they're going to run another business, or it's my responsibility to make sure that this is built into their value system. This is part of who they are. So here they are, they're here. It's 2 of my best operations people out of my plant for 2 days. Think about that, but that's, and we do this continuously. It's just an example of how we, how we train people, how we share that knowledge. We do it no time or over.
Okay, if someone has a burning question, yeah. Okay, Chris. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Joe, there was a question earlier about budgeting time. We want
Budgeting
to
time?
Touch on that real quick.
We said I would answer that. Yeah. You actually predicted how I would answer it. I'll answer it a little differently. The way, who I said this over here somewhere, somebody asked it, okay, great, thank you. The way that I feel like we budget time in our business is, look, I'm not there making decisions about where people spend their time, okay? Our colleagues are empowered and entrusted to know when there's orders we need to get out the door and when we have time to be in a safety meeting and how to balance those things. All right, I'm no smarter than they are. I'm not making up a schedule for them. They know better than I do. They know exactly what they have in front of them every day. I don't. So the way we do it is we leave it up to them. And they figure it out and they fit it in and they do a wonderful job at it. The only difference typically in that type of process between what I'll call a traditional manager does and what our colleagues do is that the traditional manager has all the information to make a decision. They're not smarter. They're not smarter than our colleagues are. Our colleagues are pretty smart folks. The problem is in the traditional thing, the traditional way is that they don't operate, this is just my belief now, they don't operate with the same amount of information that the traditional manager does. So of course the traditional manager makes a better decision in that model. You've got more information to make that decision with. But when you equip people with the right information to make a decision with, they do better than I would do, almost always. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we do it.
Great. Thanks again, Chris. Appreciate it.